Hello adventurers, and welcome back to another episode of the Awkward Dungeon Master. Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about rules. So when I say this, I mean universal rules, optional rules, and table rules. So without further ado, let's get started. So first and foremost, there is one rule that I know is universal pretty much across the board with every game of Dungeons & Dragons out there that's worth anything. And that is the Wil Wheaton Law. If you have never heard of the Wil Wheaton Law, it's pretty damn simple. Don't be a dick. End of story. So, keep that in the back of your mind. Everyone will have a good time. So, the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is optional rules. So, there are a couple different optional rules that everybody takes care of right off the bat generally when they're running a game. And those are things like the feat system and flanking, DM inspiration. So those are all optional things that are in some of the books, and your DM will tell you whether or not those are things that they do. So, flanking is basically whenever there's two allies that are across from each other with an enemy in between, you get advantage on your attack rolls. And then the feat system is where you can take feats out of the player's handbook instead of an ability score improvement when you're leveling up. And then also DM inspiration is basically advantage on a d20 roll that your DM can give to you, and there's like a place to mark it on your character sheet if that is something that they do. Another one that I've heard is somewhere in the book, but I haven't been able to locate it myself quickly, is movement. So I recently started playing at a friend's table, and he does movement as any square in any direction is 5 feet. So my understanding has always been that the first diagonal that you take is 5 feet, and then every diagonal thereafter is 10. So instead of having to deal with that kind of math, he just says every square is 5 feet regardless of direction. So that's kind of nice because it's simpler. Anything that simplifies things is pretty good, I think, in my opinion. So the last thing that I want to talk to you guys about is actually table rules. So table rules are usually unique to the Dungeon Master that you're playing with. So for example, Matt Mercer, instead of doing a straight normal resurrection rules out of the book, he has something called the Fading Spirit, which is a mechanic that he does wherein the players partake in a ritual, and each player up to a certain amount can give something to the ritual, and then they make a check. And whether or not they make or succeed on the check, it affects the DC of the resurrection. So then when the person who's being resurrected makes their roll, the DC could be higher or lower based on how the ritual went, which I've always thought is pretty cool, so I actually use that in my home game. And if you're interested in taking a look at it, I will drop a link to that down in the description below. It's really awesome. So definitely check it out. So another example of a table rule would be modifications on Dungeon Master Inspiration. So I've seen some DMs that use like D6s or some other kind of die instead of a D20. So I did that for a while in my first campaign where we just used these. I found these like shiny gold D6s so I could hand them out to everybody whenever I gave them DM inspiration. And then I also told them they were stackable. So you could get as many of these as you wanted, and say you had 3 or 4 of them in your bag and then something just went so terribly wrong. You could decide how many you wanted to use. So you roll your D20, and before you tell me what the roll is, you decide if you think that's enough. And if you didn't think it was enough, you could say, I'm going to use 2 of my inspiration dice. You'd roll those and add it to it. And if you still don't think it's enough, you could add more. So that was always kind of fun. Other things I've done or seen done with DM inspiration, I like to use these little tokens that my husband found online and printed off for me so that my players remember. Sometimes if you just have that box marked on your sheet, it's kind of hard to remember that you have DM inspiration. So I would physically give them this token, and they would be able to see it when we were at the table. So if things went to shit, they could go, oh yeah, I have DM inspiration, I would like to spend this. Spend your DM inspiration, and then you can get another one later, because you can only have one at a time. I've also seen one of my players who runs his own game now does it with these little doubloons instead of with the DM tokens, but it's the same idea, just to remind you that you have DM inspiration. We just started a new home game campaign too, and I found this pretty cool deck at the Burrow, and it's called Bill Webb's Deck of Dirty Tricks. So this is what I'm using for DM Inspiration in my home game at the moment. So anytime I give you DM Inspiration, you pick a card. They're all different things, and then I've decided that you can hoard them as well, and then you can also trade with other players. That's pretty cool. So if you pull a card like this one says, it burns! Target gets a -4 on saving throws and takes double damage for an entire round. So that's pretty cool. They're all different. They affect things in different ways. There's one in here where they can force me as the Dungeon Master to answer any yes or no question of their choice, which is kind of interesting. So I'm excited to see how that goes for our home game. And the last couple things that I do for table rules in my games personally is I do something, I call it always in your favor. So you know how in the rules it says always round damage down? I don't do that. I do always round damage in favor of your players. And it really doesn't impact the game that much in my opinion, and players really enjoy it too because it makes them feel like I'm not out to kill them, I'm out to have everybody have a good time. And truthfully, that is what my goal should be as the Dungeon Master. So having a way to convey that to them is really nice. And then the last thing that I do is I max out all of my healing potions. So I don't max out spells because if you think about it, typically you're casting healing spells. In the heat of the moment, you could be distracted or, your mind's on other things. You're trying not to die. So that, I think, is fair to make players roll dice for healing spells. But healing potions are pre-prepared, and they're really expensive. So if you think about it, you spend 50 gold on a basic healing potion, and you roll your dice, and you wind up with, 5 hit points. That's some BS. So, yeah, we don't do that. So that's all I have for you guys for today for universal, optional, and table rules. So hopefully that was helpful. And until next time, keep it rolling, adventurers.